what, hour and a half on third of the class. Half the class, to be generous. We'll continue on. All right, please say nile, mayin. Ni means two or both. Mayin means it's not. So this is called, these four sometimes called mushi musu. There are four possible permutations which include everything. Okay, so the first two things arise from themselves. They just happen on their own, or things come from something else, or things come from both or neither. That's all possible combinations. So what they're saying, what Master Arya Nagarjuna is saying here is, if things don't just arise themselves, which was the first choice, right? And if things don't self-existently come from something else, right? Then putting those two things together also is not going to get you what you want, right? The two of those together is not going to bring you a satisfactory outcome, right? The third possibility is that things come from both of those things together, first two together, right? And so that's obviously not possible. Things don't come from themselves, and things are not caused by self-existent things. That's number three. Number four, please say yume min. And then that's gyu means come, mei means from, and min means neither. So they don't come from either of the first two. Things don't come from either number one or number two. Okay, things neither happen by themselves nor come from something else. Well, obviously, also not satisfactory. Okay, so in a practical sense, if you were doing a proof using an example and you said, let's take everything in the world that functions, right? Everything that functions in the world. You said they're empty. Why? Well, one, they don't come from themselves. Second, they don't come from something else. Third, they don't come from both. And fourth, they don't come from neither, from nothing at all. Okay? So, to be more specific, take an apple, right? You say, consider an apple. It doesn't come from itself, obviously, right? It doesn't come from something other than itself, right? It doesn't come from both, and it doesn't come without any cause. Well, if you think about that, you say, wait a minute, an apple does come from something else, right? It comes from an apple seed. Self-existent, you have to say. Do apple seeds always produce apples? No. Obviously, some apple seeds die and no apples are forthcoming, right? So, remember we're talking about self-existence, right? You have to have the karma also. There are plenty of crops which are planted which don't grow and don't bring a result because the karma is not there. I'm just going to read the next one off your homework question just for the sake of expediency. Let's see, question number 2. Why is it more difficult to understand the emptiness of causation than the general emptiness of ourselves and our parts? Because it requires us to understand that the very way in which things work in the world is completely different than what we always thought. Everything, all events, all objects are caused by a shift in our projections. It's only a fluctuation in our projections that cause everything, not self-existent external causes. That's number 2. Just for brevity's sake. So when we talk about emptiness, don't forget, when we talk about emptiness, we're talking about the emptiness of something, right? It's not some abstract, vague, nebulous thing. Emptiness means the lack of something or the absence of something, the fact that something's not there. So you have to ask the question, what's missing? What is it that's not there? What's absent? What are we referring to? So anytime you think about emptiness, anytime you talk about emptiness, you have to always say, of what? Okay? If you just say emptiness without clarifying of what, you're missing the point. Okay? Emptiness is always referring to something that's not there. So what is it that's not there? And the Master Shantideva and the great masters of the past all say, you're never going to understand emptiness unless you understand what you're looking for that's not there. How can it's like somebody saying, go find me, a prashnunka. And you're like, well, okay, let me go find a prashnokal. If you don't know what it is, how are you going to find it? How are you going to know that it's not in the room? Right? It's the same thing with emptiness, right? So the thing, please say gaccha.
Gaccha.
The gaccha is the thing that's not there, the thing which we deny, the thing that we say doesn't exist. Okay? The thing that we're trying to prove doesn't exist. Never did, never will, never could. Not there. Okay? So an example would be, a six-legged person, in this room here in front of us right now. It isn't here, it doesn't exist. Probably never will. Okay? So it's not a hard concept, it's just something that doesn't exist. Right? So something that never existed. And we spend our life chasing after that thing. It's kind of a ridiculous example to say a six-legged person in this room, right? Doesn't exist. But self-existent money is exactly the same status. Money that has value from its own side is exactly the same status as a six-legged person in this room. And a relationship or a partner that brings pleasure and satisfaction, or sex that brings pleasure and satisfaction from its own side, exactly the same status as a six-legged person in this room. Doesn't exist. Okay. And we spend our life chasing after that thing, and we suffer as a result, right? So, we're chasing the gaccha, the thing which isn't even there, the thing that doesn't exist, and we live in the world of suffering because that's how we live. We've already dismissed the idea that God is responsible for everything. I think if you're in this room, you've dismissed the notion that God caused everything, and God is the reason that everything happens, and God is causation, and God's making it all happen. But we still have an even worse worldview, which is capitalism in a way. It says, self-existent pieces of paper, self-existent hard work will produce self-existent happiness and self-existent value and self-existent results. And it doesn't. It's not a true cause, right? It doesn't work that way. There is no self-existent value in work, no self-existent value in money, no self-existent nutrition in food or any other self-existent satisfaction in any object we could purchase or consume. And all of that comes from our perceptions, which comes from our karma, right? So the gaccha is the thing which could exist without being forced upon us by our past karma. Okay? It's like...
Can you say that again? The gaccha?
The gaccha, think of... The gaccha is the thing which is not there. Alright? So think of like, you're going to go buy a milkshake or a sandwich, and you go and reach in your pocket for money, and it's not there. And you're like, damn, I thought there was money there. There's no money there. Even if there are bills in your pocket, there's no money there. Okay? The ability to buy the sandwich isn't in the money in your pocket. That's the gaccha. It's like reaching for something and coming up empty. If your pocket were empty, you'd come up with nothing. You're like, damn, there's nothing there. If you understood the emptiness of the money, you'd come up with the exact same thing. Right? There's no money there from its own side. There's no value there from its own side. There's no ability to buy anything there from its own side. I got an empty pocket. All I got is karma in my pocket. Right? Like that, right? So, we have a group of parts that we conceptualize in a certain way, and that the shopkeeper conceptualizes in the same way, which functions to allow us to get something and eat it and feel satisfied. That's because the karma is ripening for that to happen. It could be in a different culture, in a different society, with different notions and concepts and all the rest, right? They wouldn't be able to buy anything with that money. So, okay. Please say Tsokpe.
Tsokpe.
Tengdu.
Tengdu.
Tokpe.
Tokpe.
Taksam.
Taksam.
Mayinpa. Tsokpe means a collection of parts. Tengdu means onto that. Tokpe means to impose or conceptualize. Taksam means to conceive of it. Mayinpa means it's not like that. Okay? It's a collection of parts which I'm thinking of in a certain way, forced on me by my past karma. Okay? Is there any object in the world which is not a collection of parts forced upon me by my past karma to be perceived in a certain way? No. We just found the gaccha. There is no such thing. Right? Okay? You can think about a self-existent thing, but in reality there is no such self-existent thing. Right? Alright? I mean, what would a self-existent pen be? It would be a pen from its own side, existing, independent of anything, right? Okay. We talked about it. You get it. I don't think I have to repeat it. All right. So, if everything in this world, in this room, and in my mind and my body is a perceptual experience forced upon me by my past karma, then there's profound implications. You know, I can reach tantric paradise in this life if I can cause my perceptions to function in a way to perceive that. How do I cause my senses and my perceptions to function in a way to perceive that? Well, you wire them that way, you rig them that way, you cause them to function that way by collecting the right karma. Hector asked me a question at the break, which is, you know, so I give this cup of tea or coffee to somebody, and I know it's not self-existent, and I know they're not self-existent, and I know I'm conceiving of them as a hungry person, and I know I'm conceiving of this as a piece of food or drink or whatever. How does that do anything? Well, it's, what is the karma? What is the residual energy? What is the energy that one is collecting in one's being, in one's mind, and in one's system of thinking that way and of acting that way? Oh, I understand the emptiness of that person, and I understand the emptiness of the giving, and I understand that I'm not even a self-existent human being while I'm doing this. And here's this wise giving playing out. And what is the energy associated with that one collects in one's being? What does that do to one's mind? What does that do to one's subtle body, right? It's very profound, it's very powerful, you see? So even if one understands that there's not a self-existent person, and not a self-existent sandwich, and not a self-existent giver, what we call the three spheres, right? If one understands that, one is collecting very holy, profound karma and energy. Because what's karma? Karma is the energy of what you're doing and the residual energy that's left over. So if one is engaged in wisdom and holy view, that's the residual energy that's left over in one's being. Well, guess what? It affects your being, it affects your mind, it causes your mind to change, it causes your being to change, it causes your perceptions to change. You do it enough, what happens? You start to see the world that way, you start to experience the world that way, right? But you have to start, you know. And it's starting that's hard, you know. It's like anything. When you first begin something, it's extremely difficult because it's a new muscle that you're exercising, and it's very weak, and it's untrained, and it's undisciplined, and you have to try really hard to get it to do even a little bit, you know. And as you exercise the muscle and you do it more and more and more, and you get better at it, it becomes much more natural and much easier, and then it's a very ready thing to see things as holy and relate to things as holy, and to then be accumulating wisdom and, you know, and holiness within oneself to start to relate to the world that way and experience the world that way, right? So in the beginning, very difficult, but then as one does it more and more, it becomes a much sweeter, blissful path to bliss, as Master Shantideva describes it, right? So thank you for the question, Hector. Okay, let's see. You know, can we get to a tantric paradise in this life without being virtuous? Sorry, no. You know, can you get to paradise without being holy? Sorry, no. You know, can you be virtuous by treating others badly? No, sorry. You know, I mean, it's just a simple contradiction, right? It's a simple, I mean, it's the antithesis, isn't it? So, you know, if we're not paying attention and checking in with ourselves on a regular basis, saying, how am I behaving? How am I thinking? How am I treating others? Like maybe checking your vows, or maybe keeping a spiritual journal, or whatever other multitudinous techniques one might engage in to make sure that one is engaging the world in a sacred, virtuous way, you know? If one is not doing that, then it makes it very hard to succeed, you know, because it's only through effort that we succeed. And if we're not applying the effort, we're not going to succeed, by and large, right? Okay. So, I mean, how many gakchaks are there in the world, right? I mean, it's not hard to find the gakchak. The gakchak is the money in your pocket. The gakchak is your partner. The gakchak is your job. The gotcha is everything that you think gives you pleasure and satisfaction. Every single thing in life is the gotcha. It's what we think is self-existent that isn't. You know, so it's not hard to find. It's not a, it's not a difficult thing to discover, right? All right. So. Ultimate reality is the fact that there's nothing in your world that's not a projection forced on you by your past karma, right? I mean, everyone here, I think, now has some deeper appreciation for emptiness and understanding emptiness. Doesn't mean that we've seen it directly, right? But perceiving it intellectually is very powerful. And try to think of something which is not a projection, right? I mean, try to look at something and think of something which is not a projection. And when you do that, you come up with emptiness. You see, that's emptiness. Look at something that's not a projection, and then you're practicing seeing emptiness, right? You're not perceiving it directly in the moment, but you're practicing with emptiness and self-existence, right?
Say that again. Look at something as not a projection, and then we're going to be reminded that the only way we are seeing it is as a projection. You want to find it?
So, look at something, right? Think of something which is not a projection. Right? And when you find it, you found emptiness. Search for and find something which is not a projection.
Everything I've been taught, I'm not going to find something that's not a projection.
That's emptiness. Emptiness is the absence of something. Emptiness is the absence of the projection. Right? Emptiness is not divorced from everything else. Okay? Emptiness is the absence of something. The absence of a projection.
That's awesome. It's so easy. Yeah. Sort of.
So, however, then Master Shantideva gets into this thing of, now while you were just thinking about emptiness, were you thinking of it as self-existent? While you were considering and pondering emptiness, were you seeing it as existing? Right? So he gets into this thing where he says, look, the human mind can't see emptiness without thinking it's self-existent. Can't think about emptiness without in some way grasping at it as being self-existent. Even if you think about emptiness and the idea of emptiness, we're doing projection of some self-existent thing. Right? Which is wrong. Which is incorrect. Okay? So, while we were talking about emptiness, you were understanding emptiness. Right? We all were understanding emptiness in some way. But while we were focusing on it, we were misunderstanding its reality completely. Because we were thinking of it in positive terms. And it's the absence of something.
Even the way you phrase it drives home the point of it being self-existent.
Yeah.
It.
The inference is there's something there.
Yeah.
Right? If there's an it, there's something there. That's why emptiness is such an interesting name, isn't it? Emptiness is such an interesting name because it's emptiness of
Even it.
concepts, right? I mean, empty of what? Empty of projection, empty of concept, empty of name, empty of identification. So, all right, so non-Buddhists come up to Master Shantideva and they say, look, Master Shantideva, you're telling us that when you talk about emptiness, you get it wrong. And so if you're telling me you're talking about emptiness, and when you're talking about emptiness, you get it wrong, therefore, you get emptiness wrong. Therefore, your position is wrong. So Master Shantideva says, well, he says, yes, it's true that when we talk about emptiness, the human mind wants to see it as self-existent, and that's incorrect. But that doesn't mean that emptiness is wrong, or emptiness, our idea of it, or our understanding. It doesn't mean that emptiness is not true, right? So that point arises, and it's on your homework. So Master Shantideva gets into the Gakchak at this point, and it's for that reason. Somebody came up to him and said, if you understand emptiness intellectually, at the same moment you're believing it's self-existent. And he says, yeah, that's true. So, but it doesn't mean that we're wrong. He says, look, it's true that I'm not seeing it correctly at that moment, but that doesn't mean that emptiness is false. Just because I have some fuzzy idea about it and I'm seeing it as self-existent doesn't mean that emptiness is false. It means I'm getting closer by even by talking about these things, even by having these conversations, and even by having fuzzy self-existent ideas about emptiness, we're moving closer to enlightenment. Right? It's moving us closer to enlightenment. Right? Is emptiness empty? Yeah, it's a projection. Right? Why? Everything's a projection, even emptiness. Right? Everything is a concept. Emptiness is a concept. We deal and live in the realm of concepts. Therefore, we have to create a concept to talk about ultimate reality. It's not in any way accurately describing ultimate reality, because ultimate reality doesn't have concepts. And we are using concepts to talk about it. So we're using something that doesn't exist there to talk about what's there. So it's apples and oranges in a way, That makes sense. Yeah.
It seems to be pointing to the ultimate reality.
Right.
It's the tool that points to the ultimate reality.
It's like putting a big arrow up or something, pointing that way, right? Saying, head over there, right? And when you get there, you just go, whatever it is you do, okay?
Because it's a negation, it's almost as the whole progression is laid out, not here, not here, not here, not here, not here, rather than the arrow pointing towards.
Yeah. I'll tell you my personal view, and that is because we live in a world of self-existence for infinite time, there's a very heavy, strong emphasis on negation, negating self-existent view. Because for infinite existence we've seen things to be self-existent, in the scriptures when they talk about, this is my perspective, in the scriptures when they talk about ultimate reality, negate self-existence, negate self-existence, negate self-existence, right? And so I think it's easy for people to lose sight of the fact that there is an ultimate reality. We've done negation, 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 negation of self-existence because we're so inured to it, and so habituated to it, and so magnetized to it, But just because we're negating all these self-existent things doesn't mean there's nothing there. Right? There is something. There is ultimate reality. It does exist. Right? So this is my perspective on it. And I think it takes a while for a person to get to the point where they've gone through enough negation where they can kind of see past that. Does that make sense? But first you got to go through negation. Yeah. Okay. So then also, karma is not self-existent. Karma is a concept, right? Just as emptiness is a concept, right? I mean, if karma were self-existent, we could never change our karma, right? We couldn't purify it, right? No one, and if karma were self-existent, everyone would believe it, right? If karma were the true law of highest reality, self-existently, everybody would be going like, the instant they exposed to it, they'd be like, holy Christ, whatever. Holy Mr. Karma, whatever, I don't know, And they'd be immediately sold. And they'd buy in 110%, and that would be that. So karma is not self-existent either, right?
That's why there's no TV show called The Karma Show.
Yeah, right? So, yeah. So there's a line that where Master Shantideva explains the importance of understanding the Gakcha, and it's the most important line in the entire Bodhisattva Charyavatara. Let's see if I can find it. It's probably on the whole. Oh, it's the one I just did. Aha, there you go. It's not just me conceiving of the collection of all the parts in a certain way, being forced by a past karma to see it. All right, we did it. I'm skimming because it's getting late.
What's the most important line in the book?
Did you really want to know?
Nah, that's all right. So many lives to go through. I'll hear it.
That's great. All right.
I'll put that in the half-past teacher.
All right, here it is. All right, that's great. All right, please say Takpanu.
Takpanu.
La.
La.
Marekpar.
Marekpar.
Deyinume.
Deyinume.
Zinmayin.
Zinmayin.
Until you can identify the thing that you thought was there, you can't recognize that it doesn't exist. Until you can identify the thing that you thought was there, you can't recognize that it doesn't exist. Right? You have to identify the Gakcha. You have to identify the self-existent thing before you can negate it. We just talked about negation, right? When we talk about emptiness, we're negating a self-existent thing. There are no self-existent things. There is no self-existent money. There is no self-existent nourishing food. There is no self-existent anything. There is no self-existent sexual pleasure. There is no self-existent happy relationship. And on and on and on. Okay? So we have to identify that and we have to talk about it, right? So I'm going to go through it fairly briefly without the Tibetan. There are three schools, three main schools, Tibetan Buddhism, which define what the self-existent thing is, what the Gakcha is, okay? All right, so please say Tendril.
Tendril.
Tendril means dependent origination. So this is the way that things really happen. Things are empty because they depend upon other things. Right? Things exist in dependence upon other things. Everything exists in dependence upon something. Right? And each of the schools of Buddhism has a different idea of what it depends upon. Right? So different schools of Buddhism have different ideas about what dependent origination means. Three different ideas. Okay. All right. The first one is things exist in dependence upon their causes and conditions. All right? Things exist because they depend on their causes and conditions. Like trees exist depending upon their seeds and sunshine and fertilizer and all that. Right? This is the Abhidharma school, the logic school, mind-only school. These schools believe that this is what dependent origination means. Right? Things are empty of existing in any other way other than independence upon their causes and conditions. Okay? Things exist in dependence on their causes and conditions. They don't exist any other way. That's the only way that things exist. Nothing exists except what depends upon its causes and conditions. Right? And so that's stated in the positive and the negative. Okay? All right. So often when people teach Buddhism, they never get past this part. They just say, okay, everything's caused. That's the profound teaching of Buddhism, and understand causes, and you'll get it. So, secondly, please say, things exist because they depend on their parts. This is the second, more sophisticated school.
Excuse me?
Mhm.
Could you repeat that?
Things exist in dependence upon their parts. Things exist because they depend upon their parts. This is the independent school, the lower half of the Madhyamika, lower half of the middle way school. And they say that school number one is inaccurate because there are certain things which exist which do not depend upon being caused, like empty space. Empty space was not caused. Space is a frame of reference where I put this object. There's a frame of reference where this is being placed, and that exists without being caused. So the next higher school would say there are a few things which are not caused, which do exist. Therefore, your explanation of how and where everything exists is lacking. And so they say everything has parts. Empty space has parts. North, south, east, west. Everything's got parts. Okay. All right. And then finally, the highest school says things exist in dependence upon your thinking of the collection of the parts in a certain way, which is the Prasangika, the upper middle way school. They say, yes, everything has parts, and the parts aren't that for you until you think of it that way. Right? It's what we did in step 6 of our Nagarjuna's 7-step analysis, which is you can get a collection of parts together, but until you think of it a certain way, it isn't that for you. Right? Okay. All right. So let's see, homework, last question. The other thing to say about that, is on your homework, is why is that? The homework asks, why is each school a higher view than the previous one? So the third school, the Prasangika, Madhyamika Prasangika, their idea that things exist in dependence upon perceiving the parts a certain way, right? That's a higher view than the previous one because it provides a basis to reach nirvana and enlightenment. Like if I say to you, if I with the second school and I say to you, everything exists in dependence upon parts. Okay, that's great. If I understand that this has got 83 parts, how's that going to get me enlightened? It doesn't necessarily, right? But then the highest school says, yeah, there's a collection of parts there, but you have to perceive it and conceptualize it and experience it validly a certain way. And by understanding that and working with that, that's how you get to nirvana and enlightenment. Okay, and so we make the distinction that in the highest school, we understand that our past karma forces us to perceive the raw data in a certain way. The highest school understands that we are forced to perceive the raw data as certain parts with a certain identity and certain nature and certain functionality, right? So, and that's immediately relevant to reaching enlightenment because then we understand the exact method to create our future reality and create our Buddha paradise. Right? And then the last question, what would be a good way to describe the object we deny in the case of proof of emptiness as causes, which is how we started the class. That causes are also empty. Remember that way back when? So, how would you describe the gaksha of causes?
Is that like saying, for the first school you're saying? Or for all three schools?
Well, what would be the gaksha? What is the gaksha applies to everybody?
Anything that exists without your projection.
A cause. But we're talking about causes specifically.
It's a self-existing cause, or there has to be cause to create the cause.
Like a blame.
I'll tell you the answer that's on the homework and you cut to the chase. It would be anything that caused another thing to happen, anything that did anything at all, in an external self-existent way, rather than due to a shift in our projection forced upon us by our past karma. Make sense? Cut to the chase, right? Because we're over. Let's see if there's anything else I want to make sure I cover. So that's the sliver of diamond proof. What would be the gaksha? Anything any self-existent thing that caused another thing. And that's the thing that we're denying. We're denying that there is any self-existent thing which can cause another thing to happen. There is no such thing, right? So we've been living in a world of illusion, struggling to fill our pockets with self-existent money to get self-existent objects, and it doesn't work. So that's the point. It's self-existent causes, lack of self-existent causes.
Sashi Puki Jishin Metotram Rirang Shin Yende Empadi Songbe Shindu Mite Duargi Rokhin Namda Shinla Chuparsho Hidam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Ninyatayami Gadi Devoku Sunam Yeshe Saksakshin Sunam Yeshe Lejunwe Dampa Kunito Parsho.
See the holy being that is with you enter to your heart, blessing your mind stream. By the power of these blessings may we instantly perceive highest reality, put an end to all suffering, everywhere amongst all beings, perceive total purity of all places and times forever.
Thank you for teaching.
Thank you. So, 2 more classes to go. We've been through the hard stuff. Tough it out. Almost there. This is the hardest of the hard material. Say hi to G. Good luck in Colorado.
Hi, G.
You've abandoned us, but hello. Matt, I hope you feel better.
Say bye, G.
Bye. Bye. We're still thinking of you even though you're not here. See you next week.